Saudi Arabia is getting next year's Royal Rumble for the first time. We already knew that, but they are not stopping there. That was the big news of the week, that for the first time, WrestleMania will be held outside North America. Sorry, UK fans, you're going to have to wait because it's Riyadh season. WWE, where every season is Riyadh season. But Saudi Arabia will be hosting WrestleMania 43 in 2027. Remember that WrestleMania 8 press conference? They had Hogan and Savage and Piper, Sid, Undertaker. They were all sitting around Jack Tunney as he announces who will be wrestling Ric Flair for the World Championship. And Sid starts to stand up, thinking that it's him, but then they announce Hogan. And Sid sits back down all mad. He's ripping his papers up. That's what I pictured in my head as I was watching that press conference on Friday. Like, if you could even call it that. I mean, there were no press. There were no fans actually in the room for this announcement. But it made me think of that. Like, the UK was Sid and Saudi was Hogan. Saudi might want Hogan to wrestle on that show. Who wants to tell him? Who wants to break the news to them? During the week, there was an Arabic press release that leaked early, announcing that WrestleMania would be heading to Saudi in 2027. It was quickly yanked. Whoever the poor soul was that leaked it, I certainly would not want to be that person. So the announcement got spoiled a few days early. Then on Thursday, Triple H tweeted that at 3 p.m. Eastern on Friday, they would be making an announcement that would change the game. I'm still waiting for this game-changing announcement, or the game-changing part of this announcement. They've been running Saudi shows since 2018. They're running more international shows now than ever before. They've already announced the Royal Rumble is coming to Saudi for the first time on January 31st. WrestleMania being hosted outside North America might have been a game-changer 10 years ago. Today, it's just another cash grab in a long line of cash grabs, and that's fine. It's what they do. They go where the money is. Fair enough. But there's nothing game-changing about any of this, unless you consider the price tag, and that's not anything that they would announce publicly. So I'm still left wondering exactly how this changes anything out of the ordinary. Joe Tessitore hosted the event in Las Vegas. They had a whole event. Actually, I described the WrestleMania 8 press conference. It was kind of set up like that. They had a stage. Joe Tessitore was at the podium hosting. Vegas, of course, is where everybody was on Friday for the Canelo Alvarez fight that TKO was hosting this weekend. And WWE was hosting the AAA Worlds Collide event there as well. So he brought out Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker. Liv Morgan was there. Charlotte Flair, Bianca Belair, Logan Paul, Seth Rollins, and then Triple H for the announcement. I have seen hostage videos where the people look happier than the wrestlers did here, standing in the background. They did not want to be there. They also had the head of the General Entertainment Authority in Saudi, Turki Al-Sheikh, the man responsible for bringing all of these events over to the kingdom. He spoke, and he even invoked the name of Vince McMahon, which I'm sure thrilled them to no end when he was talking about Vince being part of the conversations on day one that started their relationship in the first place. It will remain a two-night event, although they did not announce what the actual dates would be. Mike Johnson of PW Insider says the amount of money that the company is being paid for the event is mind-blowing. Meltzer says it's in the 9-figure range, said to be well over $100 million. Oh, I would bet it's a lot more than $100 million. If they're getting $50 million per show right now, I mean, for shows like Crown Jewel or King and Queen of the Ring, if they're getting $50 million for one of those shows, I mean, they may be getting $100 million for the Royal Rumble. For WrestleMania, it could be more than twice as much. Dave also says the Saudis pushed heavily for the show in 2027, even though WWE wanted to do it there in 2028. I don't know what they would have done for 2027, probably gone back to Vegas again. But they still owe New Orleans a WrestleMania since they announced it publicly and then they yanked it away from them out of nothing but pure greed. But the Saudis wanted it for 2027 because that coincides with the country's 300th anniversary celebration since it was founded in the year 1727. And they wanted a number of special events that year, and WrestleMania was going to be one of them. Now, there was a rumor floating around that maybe they would do 2 WrestleManias that year, with the idea of taking the Saudi money and doing one there, and then another one in the North American market. I'm glad that turned out to be just a rumor, because that would be a fucking terrible idea. Can you imagine 2 WrestleManias in 1 year? We already have that anyway, basically, with SummerSlam. They call it the WrestleMania of the summer. They do them in giant stadiums. Now they're 2 nights, just like WrestleMania. What the fuck do we need a second WrestleMania for? That would be awful. I got a question once, not that long ago, about, well, what if they were to do it WrestleMania 2 style? And you have 1 night in Saudi and you have 1 night in the States. First of all, there's a reason they haven't done that since WrestleMania 2. Okay, that was in 1986. And they have not done anything really like that on that scale since then. I mean, WrestleMania now is on such a bigger scale. But that's a logistical nightmare, number one. Number two, Saudi Arabia is not paying $200 or $300 million for half a WrestleMania. So that was never going to happen either. But the plan is to build all of the usual events around this one, including SmackDown, Raw, the Hall of Fame. They were also encouraging, during the event, they were encouraging American citizens, all their, American fans, to fly in for the show. And I'm sure there are some who will. Most will not. A lot of fans may not even be able to afford it. Can you imagine how much those ticket prices are going to be? Wait until I talk about that later. What Mark Shapiro had to say this week about ticket prices. It's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. But look, none of this is surprising. They have been in business with the Saudis for 7 years now. They're set to be pulling in $50 million for every show that they do there. They just opened an office in Riyadh. This was the next natural progression of the relationship. And I'm happy for my Saudi listeners who get to go to a WrestleMania for the first time. Whenever there's like a big Saudi show, there's a handful of people I correspond with. You've seen some of the sound off signs at some of the Saudi shows. So they have some hardcore fans over there. And so for them, I'm sure they're excited to get a WrestleMania for the first time. And at least I'll be able to cover the show a lot earlier in the day than I normally would. That's a plus. What is that going to be, a 1 o'clock Eastern start, probably? That's usually around the time those shows start over here. But I am already dreading the stories about what big stars they're going to try to coax out of the retirement home for this show. It's already starting. Meltzer says the Saudis are pushing for Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson to wrestle in one of the main events against either Roman Reigns or Cody Rhodes. I guess Meltzer's got those sweet Saudi connections, because he says the negotiations with Rock are advancing, and they believe the deal is close to being finalized, although he admits he's not been able to confirm any of this with those in WWE. But the impression that he got is that the final payment for the show would be affected by whether or not they get Rock in the main event for that show. And he would be paid, and I'm sure he would be, multiple times that of any pro wrestler for any event in the history of the world. Now, the General Entertainment Authority is said to want a packed show with megastars. So naturally, there's been talk about a lot of big names. There's been talk about The Undertaker wrestling. There's been talk about Shawn Michaels wrestling. There's talk about Stone Cold Steve Austin wrestling on the show. He'll be 62 years old by that point. Austin doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that's coming back just for the payday. His pride will not allow it if he doesn't think that he can go in there and have a good match. And maybe he does. But I get the sense with him it's about more than just money. He spent 19 years in retirement before they finally convinced him to get back in the ring, and even then they wouldn't announce the match in advance. You don't think he could have made untold millions of dollars during those 19 years for a comeback match against somebody like a CM Punk or a Brock Lesnar? And he chose not to. They were right outside his home this year in Vegas, and all he did was ride his ATV to the ring and nearly kill some people. So I don't know if he's going to have a match on that show or not. I'm sure there are fans that would love to see him and CM Punk in a match after all these years. Point is, we don't need to be going backwards and flooding the card with old guys who don't need to be in the ring anymore. So you have a lot of fans upset for a variety of different reasons, all of which have been documented ad nauseum over the years. Again, this is not new. I mean, they've been working with, the Saudis and having events there now for over 7 years. Like I said, this was the next obvious progression of that relationship. I think where I think it's really sad is that it really does now more so than ever. When it comes to an event like WrestleMania, it really just does come down to the dollars and cents. I liked it when there was some more variety. You spread WrestleMania around to other states and places, and there's plenty of states here in the US that have never gotten to WrestleMania before. And so you bounce around from place to place, and now it really just comes down to the almighty dollar and nothing else. That's why they literally announced the show for New Orleans and then yanked it so they could go back and run Vegas for a second year in a row. A pure cash grab, money play, nothing else, nothing else factored into this decision. That was the only reason they did what they did. And it makes you wonder, if they're being blown away by the money that they're being paid for this Saudi show in 2027, let's just say Saudi Arabia said, you know what, we want WrestleMania again in 2028, or we want it back in 2029. And here's how much we're going to pay you. We're going to up the offer. We're going to pay you another $50 million on top of what we paid you last time. What do you think TKO would do? They would drop everything and say, sure. We may get, Saudi Mania every other year going forward. And that would be terrible because I think that there should be more variety in it. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of fans over in Europe and over in the UK who were very upset after they were teased a few years ago at the prospect by John Cena at Money in the Bank, standing in the middle of the ring and telling the fans, let your voices be heard if you want WrestleMania to come to London for the first time. And those people went nuts. They did exactly what he told them to do. They let their voices be heard. Your voices don't matter. Your voices mean shit. Unless you're going to cut them a check for $250 million, your voices do not matter, is what they're telling you. And I think that's sad. But I'll tell you what this does do. It opens up a huge opportunity for someone like AEW to step in and run their own show that night. Now that WrestleMania is airing in the daytime hours here, right? Here's Tony Khan's chance to do a little counter programming of his own and plan a big event stateside over WrestleMania weekend, not head to head, because that would be obviously, suicide for them, but in the space where WrestleMania would normally be airing and do it here. Now, he's not going to be able to steal headlines away from WWE because it's going to be all about WrestleMania for the first time coming to Saudi Arabia, and it's still WrestleMania at the end of the day. But whatever fans would normally attend WrestleMania that won't be that year, I'm not saying all of them would come, but there's a lot of fans that would attend a big wrestling show that weekend. And if he wanted to bring other promotions in on the fun, then so be it, because this is going to have a negative effect on all of those independent promotions that typically build their events around WrestleMania weekend, conventions like WrestleCon. This is where AEW can step in to fill that void and make some money of their own. I say AEW because there's really nobody else, that could scale something up that big, and that includes TNA. Although if they did, I could see WWE helping TNA run something stateside to counter that. Yeah, there's no way they would let them run something that weekend without countering it somehow. And fair play if they do, whether it's a TNA event or an NXT event. I'm just saying, what would normally be a very lucrative weekend for these other events and these other promotions suddenly isn't going to be there in 2027. So there's an opportunity for someone else to step in and try to fill that void. Even better if they did it in New Orleans. Wouldn't that be something?